So I always like to say this whenever I talk, just to orient people. I have 5 slides here, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to try to keep this brief, get this going here. I'm going to talk about the quarterly briefly. I think that of all the journals that we're going to talk about today, my bias would be that this is maybe our most relevant because this is the journal that goes to thousands of practitioners. Okay, so for all those of you who are NCDA members, you know that every 3 months you get this journal in the mail. Some of us read it, some of us don't, but at least you're getting it, right? At least it's like getting sent out. We all read it. So I personally feel like if we're really thinking hard about the P of this integration, that this is the place where you would probably do it the best. Because this theoretically is the place where you are getting the most eyeballs on articles from people in the field doing career counseling. So I don't know if this was what I was supposed to do for this talk, but it's something that I just wanted to briefly talk about because it's my own lens on the world of publishing that I just wanted to share, which is that for us to actually get articles out there and published in these journals, they have to be articles that are like really nicely formatted. It's something that is like a journal reviewer and that I'm always working on and working with myself on, working with people who write articles on. So you probably didn't think you would hear about journal formatting today, but I just want to say like a minute about formatting papers. Okay. So this is the APA 6.0 manual. If you don't have it, I would get it and just go through it. About 10 years ago, when I was first or second year graduate student, I had a journal editor tell me at an SVP conference. He said to me, "Ryan, when I review journal articles, I can tell whether the paper will be accepted or rejected by just looking at the first 3 pages. And not even reading it, just looking at the first 3 pages." And what he was meaning was that when you have an abstract, a title, an abstract, and an introduction page, all of those things have like, you don't know, but 30 to 40 different formatting things in them, and they're all actually pretty standard. And so what he was saying was that if you see someone submit a journal article and those are all perfect, it probably means that the rest of their paper is also really well done. And it's actually a good sign for the rest of the paper, okay? So one of the things that I learned this from working with David and Bob. And so if anyone wants this from me, I actually have a template that I start every one of my papers with that is a blank formatted template with the margins right, with the running head right, with the page numbers right, with the headings and subheadings right, that I just fill in text around. Because that's how you're supposed to format things. I mean, I wish it was a little more creative, but it's not. So if anyone wants that from me, just send me an email. I'll be happy to give it to you. So I think I'm saying that because this is like the gateway in a lot of ways to getting a paper accepted and seen, is having it be really well formatted. Obviously, going through the theory, research, practice setup is important. And CDQ is a really unique outlet in this sense because if you're going to be successful in CDQ, you need to have a really strong practice section at the end. Most of the other journals that I would write for, they want a practice section, but oftentimes it's really short. But with CDQ, this often is viewed as the bulk of your paper. It's really where they want you to do it well. So there's obviously all these integration challenges around writing journal articles, for CDQ in particular, but for other journals. One is using a specific theory. So really strong articles will have, again, this is maybe just my bias, but in my opinion, you'll have a first page of an introduction, you'll have 2 paragraphs in your intro, you'll end that introduction saying, what's the goal of this paper? And then your next subheading is called theoretical framework. That you pick a framework that you're going to use to orient your paper. Well, this is really hard because if you're doing an SCCT paper or a psychology of working paper, you actually have a framework you can use to draw on that people have done many, many times before. But if you're doing something that doesn't fit in these frameworks, trying to come up with a framework to fit things in is really hard. So from my personal experience, I do a lot of research on work as a calling. We have no theory around this, okay? So most of my papers on it probably have suffered in quality because I'm not drawing from a specific theory. Now, I try to do this sometimes. I try to like tie things together in some way. Sometimes it works. Sometimes the journal reviewers are like, this really isn't working, nice try. But having the framework is really important. So if you have it, it's really better for your paper. I think, though, that the real challenge is trickling things down to career counselors. So one of the examples I like to use for myself is that I work at the University of Florida. About 200 feet away from me is the Career Center. We have no contact with each other. Like we don't, our lives are just different. I almost never see them, I never work with them. They have, their model they use there is a chaos model. Not actual chaos, but the chaos theory. Okay? So, you know, like I love chaos theory. I think it's really cool. But I don't do anything in that area. And so why I'm telling you that story is I'm sitting in my windowless office writing these journal articles that like 5 people are reading. And 200 feet away is this enormous career center where we have 50,000 undergraduate students where they are actually doing real things and like seeing clients and doing real work. What is my connection? What is our connection? What do I actually know about what they're doing? And how well does that tie to the research I'm doing? I just don't really know. And so learning about actually what is trickling down, I think is really important. My student Blake Allen, former student Blake Allen, did a study a couple years ago where he actually surveyed real career counselors asking them, he's really into meaningful work, and he was asking them, how often you talk about meaningful work specifically in career counseling? And it's just a small study with like 300 career counselors, but it was a good example of actually surveying people in the field and getting a sense of what they're really doing. Because I don't know, to be honest. I mean, are most career counselors using social cognitive career theory? I don't know, you know? So we can like assume what they think they're doing, but until we get that data, I think we don't really know as much. So here is what I would view as our biggest recommendations. And I kind of feel a little bad about this because 2 things got brought up yesterday that kind of pushed against my recommendations, but I'll make them anyway. I personally feel, for those of you who know some of the research that I do, this isn't surprising to you, that really what we need is not only learning about what real career counselors are doing, but what career counselors are doing not in college counseling centers. We need to know what they're doing in the real world, when they're working with populations that don't have a lot of choice, that are just trying to find decent work, that are not trying to find their calling, that are really just trying to find work that they can support themselves and their families on. What are those people doing? You know, like FSU is such a great program because they do so much integrated research in their career center, so they really know what's going on, right? But students at FSU and UF are for the most part very privileged in comparison to most people around America. So what are people doing out there in the community, I think, is really important. And of course, hearing the voice of the practitioner. So Naja said yesterday that she tried to do a practice section of TCP. You said it didn't work as well as you thought. I'd like to talk to you later about why it didn't, but you know, this is of course where my vision would go with CDQ in particular. I would love to, this would be my dream. I would love to see somehow we find the 1 or 2 career counselors doing work in the community that are really strongly using our theories, you know, like the psychology of working person, the social cognitive person, that we find these people and then we pair them with David or Bob and Steve, and then they just write an article together. You know, like they actually, the 2 of them come together and like we kind of force them to work together and figure it out. So we actually get a sense of what's going on in the real world. I think if we did things like that and we had sections like that, I think they would be more well-read. I don't know that for a fact. But in my opinion, actually hearing what's going on out there, not just from our perspective, but mostly researchers, but from practitioners, I think is the most important thing. And I will stop there. Thank you.